Thanks
Hello.
for having me.
Yeah, well, lucky to have you. Schönen guten Tag, Herr Umland. German political scientist, research fellow at the Swedish Institute for International Affairs. We have in our studio my dear friend and colleague Simon Schuster, senior correspondent from Time Mag. We've been just discussing what can be done by Ukraine to deliver the image of the country at war to everyone. Because I've been in New York, Simon. I've met you in your Time office. I've been talking to people on the street, and I've asked them a question. Did you know what's going on in Ukraine? And someone said, yeah, I know. That's in Russia, right? So obviously, the society is not that well informed, and obviously, Ukraine is not delivering enough its message to Western politicians, to Western people, why the United States, one of the main allies of Ukraine, should be supporting Ukraine. The aid should be unwavering until the victory is achieved, because this is of human values. Maybe you gentlemen have something to propose. Maybe you know how to do it, or at least let's speculate about that. Let's just talk for more about it. Mr. Umland, you're going to be first. I'm asking you a question.
I think it's very seductive here to see this war as just another post-1945 war that is similar to the many wars that we've seen across the world since the creation of the United Nations and the end of World War II. But this war is different in at least two ways. First, it's a plain war for territorial expansion. It's not just a conflict between Ukraine and Russia, but Russia is actually extending its territory at the expense of Ukraine. And both of these countries are members of the United Nations. And moreover, Russia is a member of the Security Council, a permanent member of the Security Council, and is using its veto power in the Security Council to secure, so to say, its territorial gains and to expand its territory. Ukraine, many people don't know that, is a founding member, unlike the Russian Federation, of the United Nations. The Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic was in 1945 already a member of the United Nations when it was founded. The Russian Federation was not. The Soviet Union was a member,
of course, yes,
of the United Nations. And now Ukraine is losing territory to this new country that emerged in 1991, the Russian Federation. The other specificity of this war in comparison to other wars is that, in my opinion, it includes a genocide. It includes a targeted attempt by Russia to destroy the Ukrainian nation. For instance, illustrated by the deportation of apparently tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Ukrainian children from Ukraine into Russia or into the occupied territories, displacement in the occupied territories in Ukraine that are under Russian control, and then their re-education and a change of their identity, their national identity, partly even their individual identity. Apparently, there are even cases where the names of the children are changed so that they cannot be traced. And there are many other signs that I think support an argument that this is not just the usual war that you have, but this is actually a genocidal war. In German, we would even say perhaps Vernichtungskrieg, a war of annihilation. It's not the same as one should also say as the Nazis' war, and there are no gas chambers as far as we know. But it is still an unusual war in the post-1945 period in that it includes this targeted attempt to destroy an entire nation by killing people, by deporting people, by re-educating children, by terror campaigns against civilian targets, civilian infrastructure. by trying to destroy the Ukrainian culture, state, and nation. And this makes this war different from the many other wars that we've seen in 1945, and that should ring alarm bells around the world. It also puts under question, by the way, the nuclear non-proliferation regime, because Russia is, of course, behaving the way it is. It behaves because it has nuclear weapons, and well, Ukraine has to behave the way it behaves because it does not have nuclear weapons. And Ukraine is forbidden to have nuclear weapons by the non-proliferation treaty, and Russia is explicitly allowed to have nuclear weapons by the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And that puts the whole logic of the non-proliferation regime on its head, and it actually encourages both revanchist powers to obtain nuclear weapons, and it also encourages, maybe that is something that most people, which is least acknowledged, potential victims of revanchism to perhaps also obtain weapons of mass destruction, because they don't want to be in the position of Ukraine. They don't want to be as stupid as the Ukrainians who gave up their nuclear weapons in the 1990s in exchange for the well-known Budapest Memorandum. So this is really a major attempt to destroy the whole international security system, not just the liberal international order. This is not only about democracy and freedom and individual rights or something like this. This is really about the order of states, borders, territorial integrity, political sovereignty, and elementary international security.
Let's take it to another level. Let me ask you, gentlemen, if that will be for us to decide, what do we do about it? You're absolutely right, Mr. Umland. I agree with you. I think Simon agrees with me just as well. These things are right that you say. So what do we do? Obviously, the whole system, each and every system of our world is not ready for that. I mean, the Security Council presided over by Russia. Absurd, isn't it? And like people are looking for mechanisms and for excuses just to stand up and go away, not to talk to Russia in that tone, because Russia is killing people. Russia is abducting children. So what do we do about it? You stated the facts. I believe you. I understand you. I'm with you. I agree with you. But what do we do? What's the next step? I mean, let's speculate. Let's talk about that. What do we do to change the course of events? What do we do to make the United States understand that clearly the weaponry has to be delivered right here and now as fast and as soon as possible? What do we do about German Chancellor that goes back and forth with the decisions, but now maybe better? What do we do for the world to understand that Ukraine is only the start? If the monster would be able to devour, it would devour anything else.
Well, maybe Simon wants to say something, but no.
Yeah, I think you're much more better equipped to answer these kinds of questions. I'm not a political strategist. These are some of the hardest questions that you've put on the table that the geopolitical minds of the world should be working on, I hope. Again, as a journalist, I observe and I record and I try to get to the crux of what is happening. So I would rather pass it on to the expert in global affairs to give us some idea of how to change the kind of, it's beginning to feel like a stalemate, at least geopolitically, at least in terms of the conversation at the global level at the United Nations. I was there. I think we were both in the hall when President Zelensky addressed the UN Security Council. Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia was not in the room. He came in a bit later, before President Zelensky had his chance to propose some fairly well thought out reforms to the UN Security Council. But I think the structure, as you've both pointed to, the structure of the UN Security Council looks a little bit laughable when you have Foreign Minister Lavrov walking in right after President Zelensky spoke, and continuing to regurgitate these pretty genocidal claims against Ukraine. Again, justifying the war of aggression that Russia started, and continuing to block any attempts at the international level with the established structures, the established levers of power that the world is supposed to have to act together to stop this kind of aggression. So I think, there's some certainly reforms called for of the available mechanisms that the world has since 1945 to deal with this kind of aggression, because the ones we have are certainly not working. But how to fix them, I think it's better left to the experts, not the journalists.
Mr. Umland?
Well, there are different strategies. Some are in the field of public diplomacy. I think one lacking element here is perhaps so far more activity in terms of public democracy, diplomacy in the global south. I think there is not a good understanding of in the global south of the nature of this war and also of the genocidal aspects of Russia's war. And there is also, I think, just a lack in Western countries, of course, that perhaps where people just can't believe these sort of crimes and the scale of these crimes, that we're not talking here about, let's say, a few hundred children, but apparently about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of deported children. So this is something to be done. Something that I also cannot really assess how much that is possible is to return to the entry of the Russian Federation in 1991 into the United Nations and into the Security Council, because there was no actual accession of the Russian Federation to the United Nations. It simply took over from the Soviet Union the seat in the General Assembly and in the Security Council, and there was no orderly process of the accession of Russia, and so that perhaps has to be questioned now in light of the behavior of the Russian Federation, and we may now return to this. This is something that could be done. The other aspects, I think, are very well discussed. I mean, that's the military help for Ukraine, the support in economic terms. Something that I think the Western countries should also think about is how much their own interests are violated on the Ukrainian territory. The narrowly understood national security interests of Western countries that are violated on Ukrainian territory. This concerns, for instance, the embassies of the Western and other countries in Kiev that are under weekly attack by Russia when Russia attacks Kiev. And now these Western representatives and diplomats and other Western representatives have to rely solely on the Ukrainian air defense system for their protection. The same goes, something similar goes for the nuclear power plants in Ukraine. If something happens there, something disastrous, that would, of course, not only then concern Ukraine, but also neighboring countries where, let's say, radioactive clouds may fly to, as we had in 1986 when the catastrophe in Chernobyl happened. By the way, Chernobyl is, again, actually a quite risky place because the reactor is still there, the destroyed reactor. There's now this so-called sarcophagus above it, and if this sarcophagus is destroyed by the war in one way or another, this would just be Chernobyl number 2. And as Simon already mentioned, the grain transportation system is, of course, also of vital security interest to Western countries because it increases inflation, it increases the price of grain, of flour, of bread in the world, and this then indirectly also increases the flow of refugees from countries that are suffering from hunger. And these refugees, they, surprise, surprise, do not flee into the Eurasian Union, but into the European Union. And we have too many of these refugees, or at least that's how it's perceived. So this is also of vital national security interest for Western countries to protect the grain transportation and storage system. And you could say, well, that's very sad, but we can actually do something about it. We have air defense systems, air forces that could protect our embassies, or the nuclear power plants, or the grain transportation system.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your expertise. Hope to have you very soon back with us, and we can discuss all the matters that we want. Goodbye.